It's episode 114 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Please go to hankgarner.com and check out the show notes of each show. I try to put links to where you can find the author that I have on, and also pertinent things that you might find interesting, like our sponsors this week. Ellen Campbell, editor extraordinaire, is sponsoring this week's episode. If you're an author and need someone to help you get the very best version of your work out there, Ellen is the place to go. Visit her at ellencampbell.thirdscribe.com. Also sponsoring this week's episode is Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. There's a new episode of it coming out this week. Be sure to click on the link in the show notes to pick up all copies of Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. As always, thanks for listening to the show. Go to hankgarner.com and you can find all of the archives of the show there. Click on the Amazon link in the sidebar and do your normal Amazon shopping. That helps me bring you more and more great episodes each week. Thanks for listening. Now on to my interview with Brent Weeks. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm very happy to have one of my very favorite authors on the show today. I get to talk to a lot of writers on the show, and it's always a pleasure when I have the opportunity to talk to someone who I'm a genuine fan of their work. And today's one of those days. Brent Weeks, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to join you today.
Yeah. Brent, I always start the show with a variation of the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
My first memory came of that came at the hands of my seventh grade teacher, Nancy Helgath. She was my English teacher, and I was a very shy kid, I'm sure as a lot of writers are. And I had kindled a love for Edgar Allan Poe, who, is pretty weird for a seventh grader to be into. And she suggested that I read some of his short stories to the other kids who would have lunch in her room. So you sort of had a captive audience. And so I would read aloud, The Telltale Heart and Pit and the Pendulum and things like that. And suddenly I was sharing my love of something with other people. And of course, it's Edgar Allan Poe. So, you're starting with the best and was able to just captivate them and see that this thing that I thought was really cool and this connection that I made with Edgar Allan Poe over, a century and a half of space, of distance in time, could be shared with other people, and that they could sort of look at you round-eyed and be like, "Oh my God, Berenice, wait, it's her teeth? What the hell?" And so it showed me that the power of literature and the power of human spirits connecting, even if one of them was dead, and that was special and strange and kind of addicting, I guess. So I decided then I really wanted to do this thing and see if I could do it like that.
So in the seventh grade, did you found your own branch of the Dead Poets Society?
Yes, so like sort of, and
Please tell me you stood on the desk and
I think Mrs. Helgath might have let me do that if I'd been so brave. But the one of the funny things is one of the girls in that class, also a seventh grader, was Kristi Barnes, who I had this huge crush on, this beautiful girl, and she's now my wife.
Stop it. You're going to give everybody the feels right here at the beginning of the show. Man, that's awesome.
So she thought I was really weird. That worked out. I asked her out in ninth grade, and she shot me down. And I always say it only took her, about 10 years to open her eyes to my obvious charms. And after college we started dating, and she eventually said yes to me.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So where did you get this love of Poe? Like, where did that begin?
Gosh, I don't know who handed me a Poe story first, because that was a huge influence on me. I like got a complete works of Poe, and I started maybe with the poems, and I just loved the sound,
Right.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. I memorized that as a senior in high school, but I'd fallen in love with Poe, by seventh grade. So I don't know who introduced me, but they're probably at fault for everything that has come since then.
Where in the world did you grow up?
I grew up in northwestern Montana, a little ski town actually called Whitefish. The railroad stops there, and it's really close to Glacier National Park.
Okay.
So just absolutely gorgeous scenery and lots of snow, lots of outdoorsman kind of stuff, hunting and fishing and biking and hiking, and it's a strange part of the country because outside of Alaska, I think it's one of the areas where people have this understanding that nature can kill you.
Right.
And so like you read the romantic poets and they're like, oh, nature, it's so nice and everything. And you're like, yeah, but cougars and grizzlies,
right?
And exposure. And if you go somewhere, like, people aren't going to find you for 20 years. Was kind of a sense. So I feel like in most of America, nature's been tamed to a great extent. I mean, obviously, you can still get yourself killed anywhere. But I remember I was in college, and I was going for a run at night, and I'm out there, jogging along, and I'm never a great runner or anything, but I hear this sound in the bushes, and I'm like instantly like ready to fight and die, like I've got this sense of there's some wild animal that's going to attack me. I have to be ready. And then I realized I was in southern Michigan, like people might kill you there, or but there's no bears there,
right?
Or the bears they have. Any Michiganders are going to be really pissed with me if they listen to this. But like, they come up to your knee and you're like, oh, cute bear,
right?
And it was like I had this visceral sense of like what the wilderness can do to you.
Yeah.
That wasn't accurate to other parts of the country. And obviously, up in the Upper Peninsula and stuff, Michigan has a lot of wilderness. But down where I was, it was like, yeah, it's maybe a dog, or the most dangerous thing is a human is what you're going to find there. So I grew up in what Montanans like to call it the last best place. A place that is still a little wild and kind of has that independent spirit and that sort of you fend for yourself sort of thing. So kind of a different place than a lot of the U.S., I think.
Yeah, rural Mississippi is that way a little bit. It's not bears and mountain lions. It's alligators and 300-pound boar that will skewer you.
That's scary enough.
Yeah, and they'll never find you in the swamps.
It's because you'll be eaten.
Yeah, you'll be eaten, and nobody's going in there after you.
Right.
So yeah, I can appreciate that. But
right.
You're right. Disney and his talking animals, I think, has done a lot of harm to taking the fear of the wilderness away from people.
Right.
But back to your answer about
absolutely.
I'm sorry, that was my rabbit trail. Your answer about having the teacher that gave you that kind of ignited this spark in you, or gave you a platform for it. There are two very big threads that I see over and over again when I ask that beginning question. And that's one, people say, well, I think I've just always been a storyteller, or there's just always been something there. And the other one is there was a teacher or some sort of mentor or something that recognized something and kindled that in me, or got out of my way and allowed me to do something, or gave me a platform. And I love that. That's there's something about this writerly type person, and thank God there are people out there that recognize that and help us to do that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was a teacher for just a year after college, and you sort of realize teachers touch a ton of lives, and maybe every year they get one or two that they can be that touch. Out of hundreds of hours of dealing with these kids, you like get one kid and you're like, I can help you. And so I've seen a tiny bit of the other side of it, but a great teacher, they'll touch 3 or 4 a year, and those lives are never the same after that. So it's a pretty sweet job when it's really done with passion and with truth and with heart,
Right. So 7th grade, you started understanding this connection between people and between literature and people, and how these bring people together, and you recognize this is something that you wanted to pursue. How do you move forward and say, okay, this is the path I'm going to take to achieve that goal?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I immediately started trying to write, of course, and Ira Glass has this whole thing on on the gap, and if you've been reading good stuff, you develop good taste, and if you're a creator by personality, you start trying to create good stuff, and there's this gap because you create stuff, and it sucks, and you know it, and like if you don't know it, then you create mediocre stuff, and you just never get better. But if you do know it, if you look at Poe's short story and you look at your short story and you go, there is like an unbridgeable gap between how bad I suck and how amazing he is, then that's incredibly disheartening, right?
Oh yeah.
Like those who don't recognize the gap will never fix the stuff, but those who do recognize the gap have a huge gap to bridge, and sometimes it looks too big. And I started immediately writing I also discovered Tolkien about the same time, and I would read through all of Tolkien 5 or 6 times, and I like I did this thing where I'd read Tolkien and Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I didn't really like Silmarillion because I was too young, I guess. And
it's a little disjointed for younger readers.
It's a different beast, and I tried some of the Christopher Tolkien stuff, which to me is Christopher Tolkien and is not J.R.R. Tolkien, but right. that's my own thing. So I'd read Hobbit and all the Lord of the Rings, and then I would try something else that was in our library, and I'd be like, and I shouldn't name, I won't name names, but just whatever was there, right? And it's a small town library, so it's not like I had everything in the world to choose from. But I'd be like, this fantasy is crap. And then I'd go back and I would read Tolkien again. And then I'd try something else. And I'd be like, this is kind of fun, but also not like the same deal. Like not in the same ballpark, right? And so I go back to Tolkien and I'd read him again. And I've dealt with that, that dichotomy of like, I did not read nearly as much fantasy growing up as a lot of my peers did. But at the same time, reading really great stuff is during your formative years, because I think those early years of reading shape you forever. It's good to read great stuff during that time and to let stuff sink in. So I sat down in 8th grade and I started trying to write my own fantasy novel, and boy, it was like this explosion. I would write like 20 pages a day, and I got pretty far, until I went back and I started reading it. and it totally sucked, right? It was so derivative. It was like, yeah, I stole that from this guy. I kind of took that from Tolkien, and I think Robert Jordan had come out, and it was like, oh, Robert Jordan, he's amazing. Like, fantasy can have women in it. And
they can be in charge of everything.
Yeah, right. Like they can do stuff. Like, that's amazing. And women are really exciting to me right now. And I don't know how to talk to them at all, but like, they're really exciting. And so that was my first step. And it was I sort of ran into the thing where when I reread it, it was not any good. And that was super hard to take. And then I hit high school. So I had a couple hundred pages probably, and then I hit high school, and I got involved in football and basketball, and eventually I did some track, and I did choir, and so like my time just disappeared, and all of a sudden I had friends, and in real life, and so I wasn't just reading 12 hours a day and hiding under the covers and reading all the time, because when you play football and then you lift weights after school, you go home and kind of eat food and try to do a little bit of your homework, and then you fall in bed like exhausted. So my time kind of disappeared on that front, although I still read voluminously like through high school, and then from there it was like when I was a junior, I switched into a class with a teacher. My brother had her and said, oh, this lady, Jael Prezo, she is amazing, and you need to take her class. And so I had Jael Prezo as my junior and senior English teacher, and she's like the advanced, English. And so she tried to kick your butt with all the homework and dipped into like Greek mythology and Greek tragedies and, Antigone and some of that stuff. And also she had us write essays, and she had us do personal essays, and people seemed to think that I could do that really well. Again, it was like, oh, okay, this is a thing I do well. Okay, well, that's nice. Getting some praise about putting words together. Like, I know I suck, but they don't know I suck. And it's nice to have people think I'm good at something. It sets me apart from other people. So I kind of dusted that off, and I started writing a little more seriously again. But I did not. You don't mind if I'm monologuing here, do you?
No. I'm just soaking it up.
So I guess the next step was I went to college, of course, in South Central Michigan, a little liberal arts school there called Hillsdale College, and I got an opportunity to go to England, to go to Oxford as a sophomore, which was sort of amazing and sort of like I wish I'd sort of waited later, but it all turned out well. But like I was still an introvert, and like you're suddenly over in another country, and things work totally differently. And Oxford works really differently than American school systems. It's based around these tutorials. So you might have 2 or 3 classes a semester. And instead of going and sitting in a lecture hall and listening with 30 other people, instead you meet one-on-one with your professor 1 time a week. You read him your like 10-page essay that you've written. He critiques you, or she critiques you, to your face on what you screwed up, or they ask you questions, and then they assign you like 3 or 4 books. And next week you need to show up with an essay on those 3 or 4 books. Like you have like 1 hour with them that's super intense, and then the rest of the time is for you. We don't care how you use the rest of your time. Just go do it and get the work done, which is actually sort of very much has prefigured my life as an author. Like, we don't care what you do. Yeah, you can take 6 months off as long as you can as long as you can write the book in the next 6 months or whatever.
Right.
Like nobody cares. Just get the work done. it's a weird town too, because you have students, and there's students who their Monday night, like maybe their tutorials, they've got 2 tutorials or 3 tutorials on Monday. So their Monday night is their Friday night. So they're out partying. And there's people partying Tuesday night and Wednesday night and Thursday night and Friday night. And it's a strange town, and it's a strange system, and you might have like one like small class with other people in the class. But I did a story class over there, and I remembered one of the guys was like a non-traditional student in my class, and he'd been an industrial spy.
Oh wow!
So like he would go work for a company and steal their secrets and give it back to his other company.
That's intense.
Yeah, that's intense, and he was kind of a cool guy actually, and he was older, and I mean he was maybe 30 or something, but and he said to me once after one of our classes, and this sounds terribly self-congratulatory, but I'm just, it's part of the story for real, so I'm gonna say it. like he said Brent, I wish I could do what you do. And in response to one of my stories that I'd written, and I was like, wait, you've actually done real stuff. Like all I do is make up crap,
Right.
I have no life experiences. I haven't done anything interesting. I'm just a college student. I haven't had any interesting jobs. I'm just a guy who's another liberal arts major, and you think what I do is really cool. And like I looked at this story, and I knew that the story was not that good. Because I'm comparing myself, and you can't help it. Ultimately, it's a good thing. But like I'm comparing myself to like Edgar Allan Poe or Kafka or something, and like well, this story is stupid, and I just wrote it yesterday, sitting at Tolkien's pub, the Eagle and Child,
right?
So the Bird and the Baby, as they call it locally, and like I'd sit there and be like, I gotta have this by tomorrow. Here we go. So again, it was some outside pats on the back that made me think like, well, okay, if maybe if I can fool this one guy,
right,
that I've got some talent, maybe I could fool some other people, and I came up with this crazy idea where young people look at things a little differently, and can be very judgmental.
Right.
So in my judgmentalness of youth or my idealism, I was like, I don't know if I can be a professional writer. I don't know if I can be good. And it would break my heart if I were mediocre, right? Yeah. And so I'm gonna just like in this early part of life, I'm gonna find out if I can do it. And so I'm going to try, and like, cause there were lots of other, career paths I kind of thought about. Like I thought, I would really enjoy being an English professor, but I would hate getting my doctorate. Like, okay, well, you spend 7 years getting your doctorate, dude.
Right.
And like what they do is really cool. Or my school had some good political connections, and I got to go do some of these fun things and like meet real politicians, and you go to Washington D.C. and you go down on the floor of Congress, and you're like, this feels like the center of the frickin' world, like the center of the universe. Like there's so much power there, but everybody's all really interested in power there too. And I was like, okay, maybe I could go into politics. Oh, thank God I didn't do that. That would have been horrible. But like I was like, I'm good with words and stuff, and I could be a lawyer and like get a real job that pays money. And I thought, what? Instead, I'm going to try to be a writer, and if I suck, let's just find that out early, and then I'll get a real job where I can like make money and stuff. Because otherwise, I'll probably get a real job and I'll sit there until I'm 60. And thinking, I really should be a writer, and I should work on this, but I can't work on it till I'm retired. And then when I retire, it'll be too late for me, So that's the judgmental side. But like I was like, and of course I didn't realize that I had the wild privilegedness, I guess, of my schooling was paid for, so I didn't graduate with ridiculous loads of debt,
Right.
Which is a huge deal, because you can take a crappy job if you don't have loads of debt,
That's
and
right.
you can still write for 4 hours a day or 6 hours a day if you stay up really late, but if you have debt, you got to get a real job, and so I didn't really even realize how privileged I was. All of this would not have happened if it weren't for my parents and the sacrifices they made for me. But I long story short, or long story long, I guess, as I've gone on and on here, I decided I'm going to find out right now if I can be a writer, and if I can't, I can just drop this dream and I will go on, and I'll just be a couple of years behind everybody, behind my cohort, but I can still have a life without this hanging over me. Because you like read these stories about somebody who's like, yeah, I wanted to be an artist, but I realized I wasn't any good, so now I'm an art historian, and this is kind of my calling or something. So I thought, maybe that will happen to me, and that would really suck, but better to find out now than to wait 20 years and find out, like, I always thought I was going to be a great writer, but really I'm just a great insurance salesman, and not that there's anything wrong with insurance sales, but I wanted.
But that's not this podcast. This is not insurance salesman stories. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
The whole story changes when there's a happy ending, and but real life doesn't give you that. So I graduated from school. I crammed 4 years into 5, and Hey, school is a great time. I don't know why you would want to hurry through it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Patrick Rothfuss spent, 30 years there? In college?
Right, exactly. Man, put off real life as long as you can. As long as the hole isn't getting too deep for you.
Right.
So I graduated from school. I spent a few months traveling around with some buddies of mine. We took out this map of the United States, and we circled all the places we'd always really wanted to go, and most of them were national parks and stuff. And we said, okay, people give you money for graduating. I don't know why, but it's wonderful. And so we each had about $1,000, and we figured, we could string something together. So we drove around for like 90 days. And we camped half the time, and we stayed with friends half the time, and we went to all sorts of national parks all over the U.S. And what an amazing country we live in! Gorgeous and wonderful things all over the place. So, and then we had to settle down, and it's like, crap! I'm really not. I've got an English major. Like, what do I do in real life with this? And of course, the answer, as it has been for so many English majors, is I'm going to do something that uses my skills and uses my degree, and I'm going to tend bar. So I became a bartender, and I tended bar for 9 months, and back in Montana, I rented my parents' cabin from them. They gave me a deal on rent, but I was paying rent, man. I was an adult. And I worked half time at the bar, or I worked 35 hours a week, I guess not half time. But I sort of worked nights at the bar, and I wrote during the day. And then I was like, this is kind of a miserable life. And I heard from this girl I knew, from back in 7th grade in high school, and we started getting interested in each other, and I was like, well, you can't do these things long distance. So I moved out to where she was finishing a master's degree, out in Oregon, and I, moved to the next town over where I could find a job, and I taught high school English for a year as I was pursuing this girl and sort of pursuing this dream. And I wrote absolutely nothing that entire year, because if you want to be even a halfway decent teacher, you all your creativity goes into that, and probably especially, I'm sure, in the first few years. So I loved my kids. I did not love grading. I loved sharing the love of the written word with them, and beating them down with grammar and stuff. It was very fun. I still see some of those kids. I saw one of them just a couple of weeks ago. So had a great time, but wrote nothing. And then Kristi and I got married, and she said, "I want you to write," and I became a house husband, and I made her breakfast, dinner, and lunch, and I stayed home while she went out and made the bacon, and I should bring it home and I'd cook it up, I guess. And so we just did that for a short time, 5 years. And very quickly learned that being a starving artist is really, really romantic and wonderful and cute for about a month.
Yeah, then it sucks.
And then your bills start arriving, and then it sucks. Yeah,
right.
And so it sucked. And I was 25, and I was the guy who had the dream of being a writer. And that isn't that cute? They're following the dream. And then I was 26, and my friends were starting to have real jobs and maybe get their first. Oh, hey, did you hear your buddy? He just graduated from Harvard Law. Oh, fantastic! I've been unemployed for 2 years now. And then you're 27 and 28. And now you're 29, and all your friends that you graduated with, they now have a dog, an SUV, a home, and a kid on the way. And you're still living in the same little apartment you're living in a long time ago, and it's like, I am not going anywhere. This is not cute anymore. So it got kind of scary, if I have to go get a real job, how am I going to explain I haven't had a job in 5 years. And I thought, I'm going to say, well, I was writing a novel, and people are going to be like, you've been playing video games for 5 years. I'd be like, well, yes, but also, also
right.
Writing a novel. So it was after 5 years, and Kristi was instrumental in all that, and was like, when I wanted to give up, she's like, I'm not ready to give up. I don't feel like that's what we're supposed to do. And got lots of encouragement from other sources as well, and so we stuck to it, and at year 4.5 or something, we there was a guy that I met at this con that I went to, and I'd really hit it off with him, and he read my first book, and he's an editor at one of the big houses, and I really liked my first book, and he's like, "Oh, I've got this idea. I want to do sort of Naomi Novik sort of did this in the UK, but the romance genre has done this a lot, and I want to publish your books quickly because I'd done this insane thing where I wrote the first book, and then I had the first book of Night Angel, the Way of Shadows. I wrote it, and then I went, you know what, the smart thing to do would be to write a first book of a completely different series, because if this first book never sells, there's no point in writing the second book, right? Like that's just stupid. And also if I write 2 book ones, different series, we can be hitting multiple, publishing houses at the same time.
Yeah.
So that is by far the way to do it. And I sat down and I just didn't want to. And I talked it over with my wife, and I'm like, honey, I know this is the smart thing to do, but I really just want to tell the second book of Night Angel. And she's like, that's what you need to do. You need to write what you're passionate about. And so I did the stupid thing, and I started writing book 2. And, I got an agent at that point, and then it was like, okay, I'm all in at this point. So I guess I've already flushed my life down the toilet. Let's write book 3. And so I started writing book 3, and then we met this publisher or this editor, and he was really interested, and he was reading book 2, and he loved it, and then he got fired.
Oh man!
And we were just like, what? Wait, no,
that's not how this works.
And you have this sense in your head, you've written this book, And it's like, I think this book would do really well. I really feel like it's commercial enough and it's fun, but like you can read it on just a surfacey level and it works and it's fun. But if you read it a second time, you see all these extra things, and if you start to look deeper, it works on these other levels as well. But nobody else is seeing that. So am I just crazy? Am I that guy on American Idol who thinks he can sing and just can't?
His mom keeps telling him he's great.
Exactly. Am I insane or are these people wrong? And insane. I should just take that insurance job that my buddies offered me because, hey, I could make $32,000 in the first year, and that sounds like just money falling over a cataract, into my arms. Right now. So as you go through these things, it's really of like, do I believe in myself or do I believe in what I'm doing, or am I just that arrogant? And that was just a huge struggle for 5 years. So it took a year after that guy rejected us. He finally landed on his feet somewhere else. He started to be like, okay, I'm in a place where maybe I can offer another bid. And then boom, like 3-4 places were interested all at once. And it's like, seriously, where were you guys?
Right.
And my agent got a bid from this place called Orbit, which Orbit had done really well in the UK for 20 years or something, but they'd only just started in the US. So like I hadn't even really heard of them. I mean, they were publishing Robert Jordan in the UK, but they had this apparently really brilliant editor, Tim Holman, and he was he was being brought over, by the parent company to start Orbit US. And I was sort of like, I don't know. I mean, these guys sound sort of second tier to me. I've never even heard of them and being offered a deal from them. But, so they offered this deal to my agent, and he said no. They offered a preemptive bid because they didn't want to go to an auction. So they offered, and I don't think it's go. Shaw, it's been years now. So they offered $60,000 for the 3 books. So $20,000 a book. So that's, and minus his 15%. And it was 6 years of my life. So like at first $60,000 sounds like a ton. And it turns to 45 pretty fast. Oh, and divided by 3. But anyway, it's a lot of money. And at this point, I would have given the books away.
Right.
Like I would have given them away for free just to see them in print. And my agent said no. He didn't even ask me. He said no. And of course. Like, wait, we've been waiting for 2 years. I've been working with him for 2 years.
Right.
And I've been for 5. Like, what are you doing? Say yes. And Tim asked, Tim called back half an hour later and offered, 15,000 more. So, and Don said yes to that. So it all turned out okay. And we got on this like very quick train of like, okay, we're going to do 3 books. We're going to do them within a month of each other. And now you've got to edit 3 books at once. And it was an insane time because I had no idea how publishing worked, or like they did throw, like, I didn't realize this at the time, but they sat down around the table and they're like just spitballing ideas and throwing these ideas out. But then my editor sent me this list of ideas, and some of them were just out there. And they're like, could you switch the villain in book 2 and book 3? And I'm like, wait, but I have to do this in 3 months?
No.
I'm like, I could do that. Yes, I could do that. It would take me a year. And I think it's the totally wrong idea for the series because I built it the way, but I had to say it in like a really nice way because I didn't realize they're just spitballing.
Right.
And like, I'm like, if they fire me, I'm screwed. Like, this has been my only chance in 6 years, so. So
you think, oh, I'm going to get this reputation as being this diva, and
exactly,
yeah.
So I got introduced pretty roughly to publishing because I was like finishing the third book and doing content, deep content edits on the second book and doing polishing on the first book. And like I'd like all in one day, I would work on something in the morning, afternoon, and night. And I'd be like, okay, if I make this change in the first book, then in the second book it does this, and then in the third book it does this, and I'm like having to hold all of this in my head at once. It was like this really brutal summer, but it all worked out, and Orbit published the 3 books in 2008 or 2009. I think at the end of 2009. No, is that right? 2008.
2008, and that The Way of Shadows went to the New York Times, didn't it?
It did, but not right away. Is the interesting thing. So usually books go quickly, like they spike on the first week or whatever. And what Orbit did for me is, one, they published me quickly, which fantasy fans absolutely adore because we've gotten used to having to wait so long. And it's hard because bookstores, you go into the bookstore and you're like, oh, I'm interested in this Brent Weeks guy, and they have book 2 on the shelf, and you're like, well, I can't start at book 2. And so you don't buy any of it, right? Or and the bookstore's like, well, how long do we keep stock on the shelf? So if you got some fantasy series that takes 6 years to put out there, like have they kept book 1 on the shelves for that long? And anyway, you have all these nightmares, right? And of course you have people who don't finish their series, and that's also terribly frustrating for fans. So Orbit 1, they got the books out really quickly, which was just ingenious. And of course it was only possible because I'd written them all. And then 2, they got me, these brilliant covers, which yeah,
they're fantastic.
They'd done, and especially at the time, it was really kind of revolutionary. And they'd done it up to a year earlier, but this idea of, rather than the really narrative covers that had dominated through the 80s, 90s, and aughts, I guess. Like you'd have these beautiful Robert Jordan covers, and you like pick it up, and like then you turn it, and on the spot, oh, there's people camping, and look at how beautiful this thing is, and like, but wait, it looks like somebody's behind a tree, and then you turn it on the spine, and there's like a Trolloc over there, right? And you'd be like, oh, and then you turn it on the back, and there's other nasty dudes in the trees, and you'd be like, oh, that's amazing, and so that's like a narrative cover, and The problem is when everybody does those kind of covers, you have like this, and you step away from that bookshelf, and it's just this riot of colors and just stuff going on. And so Orbit came and they said, we don't want to try to tell this whole story with the cover. We want to just get the right people to pick up the book. And so they said, let's have a single image. And I wasn't the first person they did this for. I was the first person maybe who sold as many copies as I did. But they'd done it with, oh my God, I'm forgetting her name now. They'd done it with a couple other ladies before me, who had just, it's like a white cover with a single character on it. And you're like, okay, this is a character focused novel. And, it's about a mage. Or in my thing, it's like, oh, this is a character focused novel. It's about a young ninja. And
I think some of Mary Robinette Kowal's covers are like that.
She came out later, and she's not with Orbit, but yeah,
anyway, yeah.
It was the thing that caught on, obviously, because it worked. Because you would step back from 10 feet, and there's like this white cover,
right?
And you'd be like, well, what's that book? So people would pick it up, and that to Orbit, that was the job of a cover. Make people pick up the book. Make the right people pick up the book. And so like if you're just not interested in ninjas, you'd see my cover and be like, eh. And I like to flatter myself my book is not just about ninjas. But if you're not interested in ninjas at all, and like martial arts and stuff doesn't appeal to you, and you don't want a young male protagonist, well then my book isn't for you. And so Orbit's idea was just beautiful for its time, and so they gave me these covers, and of course they also look like very much like, or at least 2 of the 3 look very much like Assassin's Creed, right? Which was very timely. And I remember when Assassin's Creed came out, I'd already written all my books. I was through all 3 drafts I was through the first drafts of all 3 books, and I saw those covers that they had, and I was like, no, you know, for those idiots, like that's what I wanted, kind of a thing. And then Orbit kind of went, close-ish to that.
Right. It's got that same feel for sure.
It's got the same feel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different but similar. So if you like the Assassin's Creed, things, maybe you'll like this. And so they did those two things for me, which were both brilliant. But I was an unknown. We went straight to paperback. We didn't do the hardcover route. So there's no reviews, and we did a reasonable print run. I mean, not a tiny print run, but 30,000 copies. There are 32,000 copies for the first print run,
which is pretty impressive for a debut writer.
Right. I mean, it's decent, but it's not a huge print run. And then they, and then they publish rapidly, obviously. And we sold out in 2 weeks. We went back to press.
Wow.
And so from nothing, those covers obviously did work. But it was a cool thing because like a lot of times people spike on the first week because that's when all the marketing and stuff hits. Well, for my books, it was like, okay, the marketing is the cover, and then it's the book, and that's it. And you go out there, and so they sort of ran after 2 weeks, they ran a reprint of 3,000 copies. Okay, we'll do 3,000 more copies, and Orbit was also really good about being really on top of their inventory and being able to run small print runs so that you can get it out there, really quick. So sort of the how Walmart has redone distribution for everybody. It's that method of get the thing as quickly as possible. Don't have it sitting around in warehouses. Get it to its destination quickly. And so they did that. So after 2 weeks, we had a 3,000 print run. Fantastic. Great. Going back to press is always good. And then, a week later, okay, we need another 2,000 books. And then 2 weeks later, okay, we need another 5,000 books. And then, a couple weeks later, okay, let's take 10,000 books this time. And at that point, you're well, one, I didn't know any different. I was I'm sure this happens to people a lot. It doesn't. And then the second and third books were out, and it was oh, now the books are selling because people are enjoying them. Readers, book publishing companies they don't pull out, commercials on daytime television. I mean, not very often. There's a few, right? But in general, it's readers know that they need to talk to other readers to find good books. And now we have Goodreads and stuff, but we didn't then. But and so the book started selling by word of mouth, and it was 6 months later that we actually hit the New York Times bestseller list. So
wow.
so that was super cool. It was we got, and we'd been close on it's the very bottom of the extended bestseller list. Which is 32 places, and we hit place 29. It's yes, I'm on the list. You can't take that away from me.
That's what's the doctor that graduates at the bottom of his class. They call him doctor for the rest of his life.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So what did this do for you as you kind of went all in? I mean, literally went all in. I'm going to be a writer. Your wife believed in you, helped you to realize that dream. Now that the day comes, this thing is actually out there in the wild,
mm-hmm.
and then things start to happen, and more print runs. What was this doing for you as the guy who toiled on this for 5 years? And then you kind of offer it up to the world, and it takes wings of its own. What's going on in your mind at this time?
Well, lots of stuff. It obviously it's, of course, there's immediately a fear of the sophomore slump. Next book had better be good. You're not gonna make a living on one trilogy for the rest of your life, and I also I didn't trust it. And it took me a really long time to trust that, like, the money is going to keep coming over the transom, because as a writer, like, you get a paycheck every 6 months, but you don't know how long that has to last you, because okay, so we sold really well 6 months ago, or it's actually like 10 months ago, because there's the period, and then you have to wait 4 months while they figure out how much it was, and then they give you this check. And so you always have this, like, distrust of, like, am I gonna have to get a real job? And it turned out really beautifully for me in hindsight. A lot of these things are good in hindsight. Because Orbit came back to me, I think 3 weeks after the first book published, and they said, we want your next 3 books. And I said, oh, sweet, so I guess the first book's doing pretty well. And they said, we'll give you the same deal as last time. And I was like, okay, so 75, that turns to, 60 after my agent. You get hit with taxes because you get this big chunk of money. So your taxes are crazy. But it's like, I was like, that buys me at least another 2 years. And they wanted, they just wanted the next 3 books I wrote. I knew it was going to take me more than 2 years to write the books, so that's a little scary, right? But I knew it bought me more time of not getting a real job, and also they didn't care if I kept going with Night Angel, which I had ideas to immediately continue on with Night Angel, but I didn't think I was ready for that story. I didn't think my skills were to a par to tell that story well. When I ran it in my head, it kept on sort of repeating stuff other guys had done, and I didn't like that. So I had the freedom to be like, okay, I want to write this other thing, this Lightbringer thing. I want to do magic totally differently. I want to have it be not quite as dark as this series was. We're not going to have whores and killers and orphans,
Sure, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, but at least you're not going to start there, right? And
right.
We'll only have an F word every 5 pages instead of every page, or I wanted to have, guns and magic and swords all together. Like let's go to a time period and a place like the Mediterranean that I haven't seen before in fantasy. I mean, not that I'm the first person to ever do it, but like I hadn't read books that had done it in ways that I loved. And so I was like, I want to do this thing that's not Night Angel next. I don't want to be the guy who writes ninja novels for his whole career. Is kind of how I didn't want to be pigeonholed. So the wonderful thing about my like big success coming 6 months afterwards is that they're like, cool, it like because I hadn't, sold 100,000 copies yet. They're like, cool, we'll take the next thing. And I talked to Terry Brooks about this, and Terry's an awesome guy. He's very nice about like taking authors under his wing and telling about his experiences. Super nice guy. And he said, you're lucky it came that way, because if your success had come, on week 1, they never would have bought a different story from you. You would have gotten trapped into writing Night Angel until you were my age. And so I sort of had this beautiful thing where the success came sort of slowly, where I was able to step out into Lightbringer and do my own thing. And so that was sort of what came next for me. And I had a ton of pressure though on myself. And like you're getting fan letters, and you like set up a web page, and then you have a forum, and then people are doing theory crafting and stuff, and you're like, I need to answer every email that comes in. And like I'd gone from like nobody cares what I'm writing, and I'm worried that nobody will ever care what I'm writing, to too many people care what I'm writing, and it's terrifying. So it was quite it was honestly a really hard year, even though it was a wonderful year. Like the first year to 2 years were hard and terrifying, and like all of a sudden you're not just a guy who works at his computer writing a story. You're a businessman.
Right.
Who also needs to write a story, by the way. And turn that out as soon as possible, please. Why is it taking you so long? I would get these emails of like, so you turned out 3 books last year. Are you going to turn out 3 books this year? Like,
well, that was going to be my next question. Is that so? You had this this fantastic gift that you'd given yourself that you had 3 books written before it came out, and then all of a sudden that's all used up. And okay, we want the next thing, and you're like, well, I spent 5 years the last time. And I think my very first exposure to you was through an article that you wrote where you responded to Neil Gaiman about George R.R. Martin is not your bitch.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think that was the first. I think I found your work through that.
Okay.
So how did then becoming a writer who was successful right out the gate, but had these 3 books, to then creating a new thing all from scratch.
Yes.
How do you relate now to what George Martin is going through?
I relate. I mean, in some ways, I relate more and more every year, and I probably have. I understand that, like, when you're a writer, and George was marginally successful, or sorry, I shouldn't say marginally. He was a successful writer for years, and people in the community knew him very well.
But not a household name.
But not a household name. Right. And I don't know if he'd written New York Times bestsellers at all. And then he went and he worked in TV, and I'm sure he made tons of money in TV, and
sure,
and he wrote some great shows over there. Beauty and the Beast, I think he worked on, and stuff like that. I love that show when I was a kid, and so, like, going from that where you're kind of making a working writer's income. I mean, where, like, you're constantly like, okay, I've got enough money for this year, but, like, we got to get some things coming down the transom because you're a working writer, right? Right?
Yeah.
Going from that to going to huge fame and success, and, like, everybody has opinions about you, and people who don't even know you ask you questions or talk to you on the street. It's got to be really dislocating, right?
Right.
Especially, like, when you like even I not being published until I was 30. It's like I built habits of, like, what do I spend money on, and what do I find, like, oh, I only buy generic this. Like, why would you spend an extra 50% to buy brand name? You know,
right.
Like you build this stuff up, and then, like, what would you do? And this didn't happen to me, but, like, with George, what would you do if somebody just suddenly, you're used to that, and somebody puts $2 million in your bank account?
Right.
It's like it's
start
just
bringing buckets of money to you.
It's just numbers to you, and then you get people criticizing you, and I could just see being kind of like, F all that. And F all of you who have all of these demands for me. I'm going to do my thing. Apparently it works for you, or you wouldn't care. So beyond that, screw off. You know? So I understand that, and yet and it's a burden to care. It's a burden to communicate to readers who might not be fair to you. But personally, I draw the line differently, and I still do. And it's super hard to, like writers, especially writers of long series, and I've done this now a couple times. As you go along in a series, it gets harder to do. It like in book 1, you're creating all the stuff. That's hard. But you're able to do that in obscurity. Nobody knows anything about the world. You take a couple years, you do it. Then book 2, you can just make stuff up. And you're like, oh yeah, 24 years ago, that guy did this. And 29 years ago, this thing happened, and you're just charging along, merrily along, and you're finishing the story, because all that stuff just happened a while ago. And then in book, 5, you're like, wait, so he did that 24 years ago, but I already said somewhere else that he married this girl 28 years ago, and that makes her 4.
Yeah.
And you start to get emails about it, right? And so all of a sudden, like, all this crap that you just got to make up and have fun with, if you're a gardener like George is, that style of writing, instead of an outliner, which he's not, then all this stuff starts to bite you in the ass, and you have to hold too many details in mind for a single human being to hold in mind. And it gets really, really, really hard. And so I absolutely understand that like, get off my back kind of attitude. It's especially bad for the author if he gets stuck. Like you don't want to talk to anybody when you're stuck, and you don't want anybody to say the things that hurt. that when you're a writer, they feel true. You're like, I'm stuck. I'm never going to be unstuck. I'm never going to fix this problem. And that's just part of the up and down of the creative lifestyle, I think. And like having those downs. Well, you don't want to share those troughs with people who will say, yeah, you suck. You bit off more than you could chew. You are going to die before you finish this. Like the last thing you want to do is give your naysayer something to say. So I think some guys like George just say, I'm not going to tell anybody anything. And I understand that, because the psychic strains of writing a long series are significant. And when you are successful, those strains get actually much worse. Like the strain of how am I going to pay my mortgage goes away, certainly for a guy like George, but it gets replaced by other things that are kind of worse. And if you haven't had to deal with those up to the time when you're 50 or 55, it's like that makes it even harder. So I've sort of been introduced gently to some of those pressures, or more gently than George. But they're real, and it's hard. And I just have there's times I can't tell readers all the truth, because it's not mine to share, because I have publishing partners, and I have
right.
Contracts with people.
Right.
Or like I try something like, okay, we've got this graphic novel under contract, but I can't tell anybody about it until, or I started working on a video game, and I spent a year working on this crap, and I couldn't tell anybody about it, because that would be against the rules, right? And then it tanked. After all that, well, I don't get to tell readers about it, at least while it's going on. So there's a lot of hard stuff, but it does have some trickle down effect, I guess, for other writers. And you hear readers saying stuff like, I'm not going to finish books, or I'm not going to start a new series,
right,
until it's finished. And that doesn't hurt George, because he doesn't need the money.
No,
it hurts, and it hurts me a little bit, because
you have an ongoing series, right?
I have an ongoing series, right? But the people it hurts the most actually are the people who have an ongoing series who are not New York Times bestsellers, and if their first book doesn't get enough sales, they will not get to write the second book,
right?
And so it's sort of like, I understand the attitude, but it does hurt people, and those people are not George,
right?
And so I had a little bone to pick, and it's not a you're an a-hole or anything. It's like, well, the rest of us, George Martin is not your bitch. The rest of us are kind of our audience's bitch.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, George nor Neil Gaiman are worried about their book sales at the moment.
Right.
And I read that as, this is an answer from a working writer, someone
right.
who is actively cultivating their audience, cultivating their art, and depending on it. And I think the vast majority of writers are in that mindset, not Gaiman or
right.
Martin's boat. So
right.
But all that being said, you just turned in your first edits on your 4th book in the Lightbringer series. Is that right?
Pretty much the final edits.
Nice.
This was the copy edit. So this is like the 4th time it's come back to me from my editor.
Nice.
And this is these were the last sort of moderately substantial edits I do. I will see it one more time in a couple of weeks, and then I'll have 12 days to basically look it over for typos.
Gotcha.
And my assistant helps me with that. She does the god awful work of she reads it backwards. Because when you read it forwards, you get caught up in the story, and
Right.
so she reads it page by page backwards, looking for typos, which is all that it's called first pass or galleys. That's all you're supposed to look for it, and if you do more changes than that, you often introduce errors, and I've done that before, but this time I'm going to try not to do that. So that's where you get typos in the final manuscript, which the printed manuscript, which sucks. Yeah. So
And that book will be out in the fall?
yes, so that book is called The Blood Mirror, and that will be out in October 25th in the U.S. and October 27th in the U.K. and U.K. territories. For some reason, the U.S. likes to release books on Tuesdays, and the U.K. likes to release books on Thursdays. So that's when that'll be out. And then
probably up for pre-order soon, I would imagine.
Yes, it is already available for pre-order.
Okay.
We've got a couple of signed pre-order promotions that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. One will be I'll just tell you because it doesn't really not a big secret, I guess. One will be through Barnes and Noble. And theirs is always theirs will be a little cheaper. Theirs will probably be just cover price. And then I also work with the Signed Page, which already has it up. And theirs are a little more expensive because they don't have the reach of Barnes and Noble. But they can also do lined copies, and they always make sure that so have to Joe, wish you could have been in Seattle. Brent, and then they always do an amazing job of making sure the books arrive in pristine condition. So it's a few bucks more, but Signed Page and Barnes and Noble will be two places you can get it signed if I'm not coming through your town on my book tour.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Lightbringer is going to be a 5-part series now. Is that right?
A 5-part series, yes.
Nice. So will the 5th book be out next year?
I am not making any promises.
I tried to pin you down.
That was nice. So, basically, what I've done for the last 12 years now, I guess, is I've written a book every 2 years, and the thing that's happened is my books have gotten almost twice as long, but I'm still writing them about every 2 years. So like I am writing faster, but I'm not writing faster. And Night Angel got published, 6 years worth in 3 months. So it's a little slippery, but I do have a little bit of a head start on that book, and I'm excited about that, and I'm 99% sure that is the final book of Lightbringer. But I'm not going to promise when it's coming out. I will get it out as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Well, Lightbringer is one of my favorite series, and you and I talked earlier. That's something that my youngest son and I share a love for, and just from a reader's perspective, thank you for those, and it's been a great joy for me. Brent, you've been very generous with your time today. I don't want to keep you any longer. We need to get you back to writing those books and taking care of your beautiful family. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can people find you and connect with your work and follow the new book release?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun, and you've got to have me again because I feel like we could just keep chatting and chatting.
There's so much we didn't get to. You're welcome anytime. I would love to have you back on just to talk about fantasy, world building, and magic systems.
Oh, marvelous! Yeah, let's do that sometime. Well, to answer the question, people can find me at www.brentweeks.com, just all one word, brentweeks.com, or Google Brent Weeks. I'm also on Twitter. My Twitter name is at Brent Weeks, all one word. Clever. Or on Facebook, where I'm facebook.com/Brent.Weeks. Yeah, you can find me. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm the redhead with the big white goatee nowadays. So.
Oh, thank you, Brent. I'll put links to everything in the show notes, and thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was a delight. Really fun talking to you. Thanks for having me on.